Hi, everybody. I'm David Paparelli, co-founder of M-Cultivo, and welcome back to the Cupping Table podcast, where the best coffee producers and buyers share their stories, insights, and outlook on the specialty coffee space. Our guest today is from Taylor's of Harrogate. Will Woodhouse-Banks is the innovation developer at Taylor's and an evolved Q grader, which we'll get into. And in his spare time, he's managed to win the UK Barista Championship this year. His Instagram says he is an all-around lovely guy, which I can attest to in our brief time knowing each other. Will, just thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, David. I'm really excited to chat to you about coffee, competitions, and everything in between.
Absolutely. Well, I try and start these things off with an easy question. Hopefully, might be a more difficult question for you as you're training for the World Barista Championship. But what is the best cup of coffee that you've had recently?
Oh, well, I'm actually drinking it right now. I'm having a delicious natural Pacamara from Bolivia, which my friend Roland Glue at Ozone helped me air freight as an emergency backup coffee for the World Barista Championships.
I think I saw that on your social, potentially. That this is from the Los Rodriguez family in Bolivia. Is that right?
Yeah, so it's been processed at their mill. It's from one of the smallholder farmers they work with through their Sol de la Mañana program. It's a producer called Humberto Mamani. I hope I've not butchered the pronunciation of that. But it's super fresh. It's really sweet. It's delicious.
That sounds amazing. And this is your backup coffee for the World Barista Championship.
Yes. So my actual coffee we have bought from Mauricio Chatar, who you've had on your podcast before. We've bought two coffees from him. But due to some logistical issues, mainly on our end, it's been quite a while to get it to being shipped. So my coffee is currently with FedEx in Colombia and should hopefully be with me in the UK next week.
So this is a little bit how the sausage gets made, right? Because everybody
Yeah.
thinks you have all this. I don't know if everybody thinks this. Maybe they shouldn't. I think this. I should say that you have all this time to kind of prepare for these competitions, and you're coming in best foot forward. But there's a real time crunch around this, and it's not all about the amount of preparation you do, but the stars need to align a little bit on coffee prep, all of this. You're saying the coffee that you've selected is sitting in Colombia right now. In 2 weeks, you have to be in Milan, having it roasted, dialed in, ready to go.
Yeah, it's gonna be a lot of last minute hard graft when that coffee lands, but conveniently, like it's a little bit of insight into my routine, but like I talk about how I have been roasting Mauricio's coffees for 4 years. I've roasted versions of these two exact same coffees before, so it's not gonna be an incredible amount of work, but it's 2 weeks is not really the ideal amount of time to roast a coffee for espresso, taste it, tweak it, and roast it again. But, thankfully, a lot of experience will help me.
Did you use Mauricio's coffees for the UK competition?
Yeah,
Is that right?
that's right. I've used his coffee for the last 3 years. Because at Taylor's we've been buying coffee from Mauricio since 2017, I think
Wow. Okay.
2018, and it's always like super exceptional. And like a testament to that is the top three in the UK this year all used Mauricio's geishas. It's an absolute no brainer for me to get a fresh crop coffee from him for the Worlds.
Is that when you see something like that happen where it's almost, I mean, that feels like a trend, right? When
Yeah.
the top three competitors are using Mauricio's geishas in the competition. I mean, is that something that you started essentially in kind of, getting first, second, and third place in the last few years in the competition?
No, so I believe I think Josh Tarlow, who's was at Origin at the time and is now back at Origin Coffee Roasters. I think he might have been the first person in the UK sort of buying Mauricio's coffee and using it in competition. I could be wrong, but I think a lot of it came from Josh, and then people who've subsequently been in his orbit have sort of picked up on the coffee, and then at Taylor's, we sort of ended up with it because we were looking like in 2017 as a business, we were like, we're going to try the whole high end specialty
Yeah.
micro lot thing. What, like, in an ideal world, what is the best tasting coffee we can get our hands on? And this was before I worked here, and the sort of coffee team at the time were tasting all kinds of coffees, and that sort of anaerobic natural red geisha from Mauricio was like the real standout, and that was the sort of start of many years of incredible coffee.
Yeah, he's fascinating in kind of his approach to coffee. It's so he focuses so much on cleanliness of his facilities, and then there's sort of this innovation element around that, which I imagine with an anaerobic coffee like that, it would be maybe the least funky anaerobic that you could imagine, but just highlighting some amazing notes of coffee. Can you talk about that coffee a little bit that you're planning on using for the competition, or
Yeah,
is that giving away trade secrets at this point?
no, I like, there's no secrets. Like, that's absolutely what I look for in a coffee. Like, a lot of anaerobics are not really what I like to drink. Those sort of big, heavy, fermenty, occasionally acetic notes. They're not really my personal preference. And on the world, like on the competition stage, I want to serve something that I love. So
Mm.
for espresso, we're using one of Mauricio's geishas. It's anaerobic honey. And so that I've not tasted the one that's on the way to me, a big risk. But historically, we've had the coffee processed the same way, the same variety, and it's always got these incredible, like, I say, like a raspberry candy kind of note, like incredible sweetness, so complex, and just like the tactile of it, it doesn't have that sort of standard heavy, thick anaerobic body. It has this really complex body that, depending how you extract it, sits between like tea-like and juicy, and it's really sparkling and bright, and it's just got such a unique, incredible set of characteristics. And then for the milk beverage and signature drink, I'm using anaerobic natural cedra from his farm, something with more sort of bold tropical flavors that really sort of, stand up against a thick freeze distilled milk to create really kind of decadent dessert like flavors.
Yeah, we auctioned off one of Mauricio's coffee this year, and so got to get to know him a little bit better. And it was a whoosh whoosh, is what he put up on auction with us, and he described it, which is a little bit reminiscent of all the things you're talking about. He described it as the Arnold Schwarzeneggers of coffee. It was sort of this kind of big, loud, stand out on a table, cut through any kind of noise sort of coffee. Sounds like that second coffee, and so you would use that for your. Would that be a signature beverage coffee you'd be using that for?
Yeah, milk and signature.
Okay, so you need something that will stand up to basically all of that weight that would be other weight that would be sitting on the palate, and the coffee still kind of tears through that, and it does that for you. In this world where you're competing with these coffees, um, be curious on a couple things. One is processing methods and the sort of trends and what's popular at the time, and the importance for you as a competitor in selecting a coffee based on processing method. Is that a factor for you, or is it really just all about the coffee?
I think it's all about the coffee. I think knowing the processing method can help steer you in the direction of what you want to do with that coffee. But I like, the most important thing is how it tastes. And it's really helpful if you can be in a scenario where you've got loads of incredible coffees and you taste them blind, regardless of how they're processed, who's produced them. And I'm really looking for the best coffee for the right application. Like Mauricio's Geisha, would make an incredible milk drink, but I'd have to potentially roast it a bit differently, extract it a bit
Yeah.
differently in order to have, the best I can get out of that. Whereas a coffee that's slightly different has qualities that might make it easier to have a better opportunity in different scenarios. So um, there are definitely trends in processing you see in competition, like people selecting certain ones for certain things um, because of historically what they've seen, which is not a bad approach. But like for me, I think that what you taste in the cup, regardless of those external factors, is where you should start.
Yeah, and we had this with auctions, and I'm kind of I'd have a theory here that there's some crossovers between the coffees that do well in auctions and the coffees that are selected for competition for baristas. And I don't know if this is true or not, but let me run this by you, and then I'd be based on your experience. It's not like you have a data set. Maybe you do a data set of all the coffees used in competition over the last decade, and you get to really play games on all that. We're in a fortunate position where we can kind of look at the data set on auctions and say what characteristics actually get a coffee a better price and how much of a better price versus other characteristics, right? And processing method is not a characteristic. People think it is. Producers like to think it is a characteristic that gets significantly higher prices. Everybody talks about anaerobic coffees. Everybody talks about co-fermentation. These kinds of things are really hot topics. The reality is that they're used to sort of polish what's already there, it seems like, right? So variety is really important, geisha variety. Origin, less so. Panama and Ethiopia are always outliers, right? So I'd imagine in competition, Panamanians and Ethiopian coffees that are outstanding are always sought after. But you're generally looking at all origins are the same. Quality has to be excellent, and the variety is really important as you're selecting. But everything else can sort of level off a bit more and just comes down to, is the coffee good? Are you seeing that in competition? Does that kind of hold the same line?
I don't know. So I do I watch the Barista Championships every year. I've got a fairly good
Yep.
idea of what coffees have been used in the finals. Like last year, the top three, first, second, and third, all had Panamanian geishas. Along with some other stuff mixed in there as well. So you do obviously see waves based on like origin and process and stuff like that, or variety. So it was maybe like 3 years ago, 4 years ago, where it was like the year of Eugenioides. Like the
Yes.
Immaculata
Yeah.
Eugenioides was like everybody's milk beverage at the
Yeah.
very least. And yeah, I feel like sometimes it's an intentional thing, but other times like it might not be an intentional thing. Like I don't think baristas from every country in the world were like, why don't we all use this coffee that's not Arabica and not Robusta, Uh, yeah, it's really fascinating every year.
I wonder if it's vintage more than anything else in some instances, right? So La Immaculata and Eugenioides being really popular a year ago, 2 years ago, and everybody using that as their competition coffee. That made everybody want that in the world, really sought after and very exclusive at this point. Are people in a competition environment? Do people naturally move away from those coffees because they do basically there's not enough supply and so they have to move off of those coffees? Or is it really just more of, hey, that vintage or that year, that coffee that year was very, very good, but this year it's going to be Mauricio's Geisha is going to be amazing and people are going to be really excited about that.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a bit of that, but also there's always like the want to stand out and have something different. So like um when Dale Harris won the competition in 2017, he had a washed, I think it was SL28 from Las Brumas in El Salvador, and everyone else in the finals was using, geishas from Colombia,
Yeah.
etc., Sudan Rumes. those sort of things. And like I had a chat with him a few weeks ago, and he was saying like those coffees, most people in the vinyl had a jasmine flavor note, and his coffee didn't have a jasmine flavor note. It was more sort of like red berries and things like
Yeah.
that. And if it's the same panel of judges for all six finalists, they're going to taste the first espresso with that jasmine note. And then they've suddenly got a jasmine benchmark then. So every competitor after then is, if they're saying jasmine, it's like, is it more or less in quality and intensity than the original person? Whereas Dale's got this super, stable, you know, not a non-complex coffee, but a coffee which was a lot more sort of like an obvious coffee with these flavors that were really different to everybody else's, and that I'm here talking about somebody else's experience now, just not not my experience. But anyway, I'll continue to tell the story because I've begun. But that was potential. That was potentially, like a really beneficial thing for him, and obviously it was. So doing something a bit different, uh, like I believe is potentially a very good thing to do. That being said, I'm aware there's likely to be at least, 6 to 10 other people at the World Barista Championships this year using coffee from Mauricio because it's so incredibly good. There will be no shortage of Colombian geishas on the world stage.
How important is the coffee weighted against the other factors of your preparation? I'm guessing, there's obviously the narrative that you have. There's going to be the um as a part of that narrative, obviously that blends in with the coffee, it blends in with the producer's story, it blends in with your story, it blends in maybe with Taylor's, whoever's sponsoring you to kind of go do these things, right? Then there's just the technical aspect of it that you have to prepare for. There's also music selection and things like that, right? That might play something in there. Where do you weight all these kind of factors, and where does the coffee fall in?
So historically, like the coffee was the most important thing. But it was a few years ago, the score sheet changed a little bit to favor the balance of like presentation and all that sort of experience part of it. So it's fairly equally weighted now between the coffee, the quality of the coffee, to like the presentation, the coffee knowledge, showing you're an excellent barista and you understand coffee beyond the 12 beverages served. So there's a lot of thought to be made. Like you can't win it with a bad coffee, but you don't have to have the best coffee to win. Is my belief. Like in the UK this year, uh, I know Rosa, who came second, she had a better coffee than me. I know Ted, who came third. I think his coffee was either exactly the same as mine or a year fresher. Um, that being said, like I showed up with an exceptional coffee. You know, you can't play the game without going with something great.
In a world where there's I guess another way to ask this question would be there could be a level playing field in various aspects of the preparation, right? If you believe that everybody is going to be excellent in their presentation on the day, then there's not as much standout variability that you can apply to that. And this might be completely wrong. It's just outsider looking in, right? Where you say, okay, everybody's going to be excellent on the day. So I really need to spend my time on getting a standout coffee like Las Brumas. I'm gonna, there's a value to when everybody, goes left, you go right. I'm gonna go SL28 from El Salvador when everybody else is going geisha from Panama, right? Or whatever it is. Do you find your time spending more time on the preparation or the presentation rather, or getting the right coffee at this point and making sure that that's dialed in appropriately? Where do you spend the most time when you're going in?
So for like I think it's different for different people and different approaches work for different people. For me, like we we pretty much didn't consider any other coffee apart from, Mauricio's coffees because of the history of the relationship, the fact that I've been telling stories about how, on stage for the past 3 years about how we've been using Mauricio's coffee. It was like an absolute no brainer from a sort of emotional connection standpoint. And I think, like, in terms of selling your connection to that coffee to the judges, like, that's like so inherent for me at this point with his coffees
Mm,
that there was like okay, cool, we're going to use one of Mauricio's coffees, and then it was maybe like, okay, what coffee are we going to use? Are we going to get a fresh coffee? And when I finished the UK championships, I'd run out of his coffee, so it was like, okay, we need to get some fresh coffee from Mauricio. We need to get that moving ASAP. So, during that time, I could have been like, okay, maybe I should cup some coffees from Panama, from other countries, etc. But for me, I was like, I was fully dialed and locked on like my decision with that. But yeah, other people could be like, okay, we're going to taste all the best coffees we can get our hands on and pick the best tasting one. Because different, some routines are not based around the connection, the history, the relationship. My theme's all about trust. And I think like a long relationship of, purchase history is so dependent on trust. So I spent a lot of time refining presentation, tweaking things, doing run throughs in front of different people, collating feedback and making tweaks based on that. And then the coffee from Mauricio is going to arrive hopefully next middle of next week. I'm going to roast it as soon as possible. And then I'm super lucky we have, I think there's 8 or 9 of us here at Taylor's who are Q graders. So we're all
mm.
going to gather around, taste espressos, taste milk beverages, write some flavor notes, and just absolutely grind that side of things in a very short space of time.
Well, yeah, I envy all those people. That sounds like a really fun day. Just be able to dial in that coffee, taste all that. You guys must be used to that at this point. Is your routine? I guess this would be part of that kind of part two, maybe, of that question. Is your routine evolving year after year in a sense where I've heard this in comedy, right? Where, a lot of people will get 80% of the routine and then they'll throw out 20%. And then they'll add in a new 20% to try things out, but they never risk the whole thing. Other people will completely every single year throw out their entire routine, basically start from scratch and then rebuild from nothing. And that kind of has this idea of it will make them better eventually. Obviously, super high risk. Where do you fall in that? Is your routine recognizable from 3-4 years ago, or is it
Uh,
completely different at this point?
I think I do a completely different routine each year because like when you get to the finals of your national competition, you've practiced that routine like maybe 100 times, maybe more, dependent on who you are, how much time you spent on it. You've said those words a lot, and like you need to then go on stage and not be bored saying the same thing you've said so many times. So you've got to give it some energy. And then the idea of going back next year and repeating that, it's like sounds awful to me. So I don't tend to keep things easy for myself. And yeah. So the first year I did it at Taylor's using Mauricio's coffee, my theme was all about innovation. We talked about how, Mauricio was innovating at his farm, how his coffee's changed over the years, how innovation in, barista world has changed. Then last year I did it and I sort of based the theme around my podcast, which is about competitions. It was about learning from the best and like taking other people's advice, bringing it together and creating something amazing. And then this year it was that trust theme. So they were all quite different. And the sort of linking factor is the fact that it's me stood on the stage and I'm serving coffees from La Negrita. But yeah, I would definitely like lose my mind if I kept large chunks of the same routine year on year. But you learn so much every time you do it that I'm like, okay, the way I described this certain thing really was, similar to what the judges experienced. So describing it in that same certain way next year works. there's one or two like phrases that I sort of carry over. Like I say positive balancing bitterness because it sounds fun and it makes sense. There's a
Yeah.
few other little bits, you know.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's going to be, I'm sure your confidence and the way that you present and the phrases that you use, there's gonna the vernacular you use, like you'll have things you fall back on. Nobody can help that, right? And then obviously keeping some variables consistent probably increase that confidence level. Like, I use Mauricio's coffee every single year from La Negrita. It's like that probably is helpful instead of switching to another producer and then having to learn all about what they do and all that. As interesting as that would be, it might be kind of too much to add in by the sounds of it. Um, I'd be interested in, so we have producers come to us who are interested in being known as the best producer in the world, obviously, right? They want people to know their craft, who they are. There's a couple ways to do that. One is competitions, auctions are another. And we tend to tell people not everybody is suited for an auction right now, but there's a pathway potentially to get there. And these are some of the things that you can do to get there. In competitions, your advice, if a producer came to you, and you might have had this before, and asked you, hey, how do I get my coffee into the hands of a competitor and get them excited about that and want to feature that? What do I do? Is that a worthwhile, and is that a worthwhile pursuit if I'm a coffee producer to be involved in these competitions? Or is it more of kind of a feature of being a great coffee producer and not really a business model?
I think it can absolutely be a business model, because if you think like last time I spoke to Mauricio, for example, he was saying the majority of his coffee is now sold to competitors, whether that be, Barista Championship, Brewers Cup, etc. And people want these coffees because of the sort of name that's been made for them on the competition stage. That drives up demand, and therefore it means producers can, make a better living from them. So I like, I hesitate to sort of give any advice that sort of relates to coffee producers because that's
Sure.
not my area of expertise. But I definitely think it is potentially a valuable source of income for them. So I know, like Nick and Ian at Formative do a lot of awesome like open cuppings where they showcase like really great coffees in the cafe, and so I think events like that are quite good. I think it would be really interesting to ask some other competitors like how they found the coffees they chose, because I remember it was, I think, 3 years ago, 4 years ago. I think it was the Australian guy, Anthony Douglas. He used Nestalasso, Il Diviso, Omblegon for his milk beverage. And like we'd sort of seen that coffee kind of like kicking around in the industry a little bit, but it wasn't like, a rock star coffee. It was like, oh, this is a really cool, interesting, different coffee. And then suddenly he used it on the world stage to win the world championships. And then it was like, oh, we've got to get some of this coffee now. We need to check this out. So I definitely think, for all of its benefits and flaws, the World Barista Championship is a really great platform to showcase something different from a coffee producer. So I think like producers like couldn't go wrong DMing on Instagram national champions and being like, "Hey, I saw you won your national championship. I'm really curious about what coffee competitions can do for producers. I'd love to send you a sample." Like again, I don't know. I'm not a coffee producer. Don't
Right.
take me verbatim for this is how you should run your business. But I think it's, with a lot of the time with marketing, it's like if there's an opportunity there, like why would you not try it out if there's minimal cost to you?
Yeah, and I mean, it sounds like kind of broader advice on it is, you really need to get your coffee in front of people and get them tasting it. Um, it's not just going to magically happen. And Mauricio has been working on this for years, right? And performing at a high level. And and it really needs to start there. Produce excellent coffee, and then get it in front of people, and continue to kind of pursue that as an avenue. I do see it as, you know, similar in that it's a halo effect, right? To the rest of their, so maybe it's an entire sales channel like for somebody like Mauricio, but it could also just be a halo effect of, you know, and I'm not, picking on Las Brumas or their business model. I have no idea what they're running at, but it would be something like, hey, Las Brumas SL is amazing, and their name is now all over the place, and we also have a bunch of other coffees. And it can kind of provide that halo effect, just like a roastery would. In using a Mauricio coffee at Taylor's, you're going to obviously have a bunch of blenders as well, right? I mean, maybe that's part of the strategy or the gearing, and if it turns out to be an entire sales channel for you, then good. I don't know if the recommendation would be this is your only sales channel as barista competitions in the future, and you should bet the farm on that.
Yeah, no, definitely. And like, I think you'll have more experience around this than I would, but like it's easier said than done, right? If you're a
Yeah.
smallholder farmer in Colombia trying to make a name for yourself, like, and unless you've got a really good relationship with a certain exporter and importer that you're working with, like FedExing some samples from Quindío in Colombia to somebody in Manchester in the UK
Yeah.
or whatever, it's expensive, and
Hmm.
it's not super straightforward.
Well, not everybody, and this should be said too, is not all buyers are as respectful as it sounds like you are, and that they might receive green samples and they might not ever cup them, which is a shame too, right? I mean, there is sort of a, there's a respect or a regard in the industry just reputationally that, even if you're receiving a lot of green samples, either say no to the green samples or say yes to the green samples. But if you do say yes, send them, then be damn well sure that you're going to cup those and give feedback to the producer. I think that's really important.
Yeah, for sure. Like there's nothing worse than a wasted sample.
Absolutely. Well, on that kind of note, you mentioned your podcast. I wanted to get in that a little bit because we're both trying to do coffee podcasts in the industry, and there's more coffee podcasts coming. I think I see more on sort of a daily, weekly, monthly basis. So at the risk of being one of the guys that have kind of oversaturated the podcast space in coffee with you, what was the impetus for the podcast? Tell us a little bit about kind of the theme and what you're trying to do there.
So just a little side note, I keep trying to stop doing my podcast. But then people like, oh my God, you've won the UK Championship. Now you should talk about that. Or like I did like a special about disqualifications, and I was like,
Yeah.
cool, that's the last one. And so my aim is to not do any more more of my own podcast.
Yeah.
And unless, like I think there's potentially some value in sharing my experience at the World Championships with people. So I got into it because when I came second in the UK Barista Championships in 2022, it was almost like quite a shock to me. I was like, oh, actually I wasn't that far off, you know, coming close to winning, right? I was second. And so I thought, okay, a lot of how I've got here is based on me being really nerdy, reading a load of blogs, watching YouTube videos, and I thought how like it's almost sort of like this clandestine secret world where people don't talk about it, and you have to gain the skills and figure out how to win by doing it and failing a load of times and realizing the secret code to what you have to say to the score sheet. Like the rules are like fairly straightforward. There's a lot of them, but they're fairly straightforward, but they don't necessarily teach you how to score really well. And so I wrote like a blog about like why I did what I did in the championships compared like what I said to what was on the score sheet, and I quite enjoyed that. I'm a fan of the old school long format blog. Like I used to read the James Hoffman blog. I used to
Yeah.
read, like Colin Harmon's blog, Maxwell's blog. And I was like, oh, so I sort of had like a nostalgic vibe for that. And we published a blog. And then um, a little while later, sort of had the idea to make it to a podcast where I spoke to both judges, competitors, not just in Barista Championship, but also in like Brewers Cup, roasting, coffee and good spirits, AeroPress, etc. Just because the world of coffee competitions is quite strange and quite like niche, and a lot of people don't know about it. So when you're trying to get into it, there's not as much information as you'd like. So I thought it was a fairly unique area for me to have a little bit of useful knowledge to share, and it meant I got to talk to some really cool people that I didn't like that I'd never spoke to before, and ask them all about their success.
Yeah. What and key themes that have come out in that podcast? Did you have any kind of light bulb moments of, oh wow, I can take that and carry with that to me to competition, or was it more just sort of reaffirming what you had learned through hard experience and wanting to get that out in the world like the original blog was?
I think every single podcast I did, I learned something that helped me. Like it was almost as much of like a selfish personal journey of information gathering as much as it was, share it with the world. But everyone I spoke to had some sort of like little, even if it wasn't a big thing, it was just like a small thing that helped them with a certain thing. Like one that I quite often think about was I spoke with Borum the year he won the World Championship, and because they didn't have a lot of coffee to like dial in, maybe they had multiple roasts of the same coffee. He'd used a hand grinder backstage to help dial in, help select the right roast or whatever, before then, throwing a load of that coffee into the Mythos grinder. And I was like, okay, that's really handy if I'm like, because you've got an hour before you go on stage, practice with the grinder and the machine. And if I've got three different roasts of the same coffee and I want to figure out which is the best roast of that coffee, I don't want to have to dial them in individually on the grinder, potentially waste a load of coffee. So that's something that I definitely took with me. I was before my prep time, I can hand grind to the same grind size these three coffees and figure out which roast I then want to put in the big main grinder. I just like loads of little bits like that I've taken with me.
Yeah, these kind of small aha moments of, that's just a way better way of doing things. I never thought about it that way. Were there any, were there any key, I guess the connection in the podcast for everybody is that there's some sort of love and passion for the competition. And I even heard you say this on this podcast, which is there is some sort of love-hate relationship, right? There's a little bit of sadistic, I'm going to do this every single year and I want to be better, and it's going to be painful and awful, but I want to keep moving on it. Is that the same for everybody on the podcast, or that you've talked to, or is there different approaches really to this? And there's another through line that you found.
I think there's definitely different approaches, and I think different people take different things from competing or judging. Like, I imagine there's a lot of like satisfaction you get from being a part of your national chapter, whether that's being like an event organizer, a volunteer, or one of the judges. Like, I think there's a lot to be gained from that, like, professional development wise, networking wise, and just like on a sort of nice fulfillment side sort of things. I think like after I've competed this year, I might retire to volunteering, um, which I think I don't want to say it's less stressful, but I think it's less prolonged stress than
Mm.
competing. But yeah, definitely other competitors I've spoken to, like there's opportunities that only come up through competing in these competitions. Like I spoke to Steve-O, who's been the South African Barista Champion a couple of times, and I know he's been to like Australia to train with the owner team over there, and he's like got loads out of that. Like different people take different things. Like for me personally, uh, there's just so much growth professionally. Like opportunities have come my way from competing, but also like I think you get to know yourself under pressure really well, and that's something that's quite good to know for unexpected work situations, etc.
Is that why you got into competitions originally? Was you thought it would bring opportunity? Or is it purely just kind of the love of the game that you kind of get into it, or you kind of fall into it, and then all of a sudden you kind of are like, "Oh, I could actually do this. I kind of like it, and I'm pretty good at it." What? Why initially start doing competitions?
I think the first time I competed, it was because I was like, okay, this seems like something that could, bring some opportunities. I was managing a coffee shop at the time, and I was like, you know, like this is my career. Like I'm serious about being a coffee professional, and this is a competition about being a coffee professional. So like, where do I stack up against, the best in the industry, and like, what can I gain from that? How can I learn from it? And then if you do well in the competition, I don't know, on a very sort of like silly sort of level, it's like at the time back in 2018, I was like, oh, what if my CV said at the top, UK Barista Champion? Would that help me get a better paying job? Those sort of things. But the reason I continued to compete after that, one was for the love of the game. So when I got back into it in 2022, when I got back into it, I was like, it was a few years ago I did it. I really like watching it. I think it's really fun. Let's give it a go. And then I came second, and I was like, oh, actually, like, because when I came second, I never thought I was going to be the winner. I never thought like I am going to be the champion this year. But I came second, and I tried really hard. I tried so hard. I like put a lot of work. That was such a complicated routine that year. Like I did not stop talking for the full 15 minutes, and I was like, oh, okay, I came second. Like, I guess if I try really hard, I could win it. Like, it's possible. So I think after my second time competing, I was all in. I was like, okay, I'm ready to try and become the UK champion now. So it was love of the game, and I have a sort of lack of competitiveness in my life. Like, I don't consider myself a competitive person. I'm not like desperate to win board games and stuff. I just enjoy playing and being a part of stuff. But then I was like, okay, this is one thing that I could potentially win. And it felt massive to me. It was like a career goal for me. So, like, still like floating on a bit of a high from winning it this year.
Yeah, I mean, and that was just a couple weeks ago, right?
Yeah,
Where
about two
you
months ago.
Yeah, so 2 months ago, you won UK Barista Champion. This has been and I think that's important to state is, you've been in the coffee industry for quite some time, and you've been competing for a serious amount of time as well. So the amount of hours and the amount of time that you put into getting to that life goal, that milestone, um, did you imagine that it would take as much as it did to get to that moment?
Well, like the first two times I did it, I didn't expect that I would ever get to that moment. They were just sort of like I'd gone in like the first time was to give it a go, see how it goes. Like maybe there's a chance, but likely not. And then the second time I was like, okay, let's really give this a go. Um, so I've competed four times. That's 4 years of competition. But then like I coached my coach for a year. And so that was a different way of thinking about competition and being involved. But it does take up so much of your brain space and so much of your time. Uh, yeah, I think my mindset to it and my approach to it has changed every year. So, like, I don't like, I definitely don't think it would have been good for me if I'd won the competition, the first time I did it or the second time I did it, or even like last year. I don't think I was in the best place, which sounds silly because I'm like, oh, I'm in the best place and I've won it. But I feel like mentally, and I think I was in the best place mentally and physically to win it this year, and everything like the stars sort of aligned. Like the coffee was amazing, I delivered a routine that I had a load of fun with and I really enjoyed, and that I believed in. So yeah, I think every day is a school day is the phrase, right?
What's your advice on time management, right? When you're thinking through, I'm going to have to prepare for this competition. I'm going to have to participate. I also have this podcast that I'm trying to quit. I also have, my full-time job, my day job that I have to perform at. Um, you've got other things in your personal life. You got family, you got friends, you got all these other things that I'm sure you want to be a good friend. I'm sure you want to be a good son, a good brother, these kinds of things, right? How do you manage all of that and prioritize it well leading up to, a competition?
So I'm going to give you a proper answer, but I'm going to start with my usual get out clause of I think it works differently for different people, and you really need to
Yep.
work hard to figure out what is best for you. So I listened to yet another coffee podcast by The Drip, which is Cole and David, who coached the last two world champions, Mikhail and Borum.
Yep.
And on there, Borum was saying that he would go into the practice space and be like, okay, I'm going to do 10 run throughs a day. And then on the flip side, Mikhail was like, I'm only going to do one run through a day. It's going to be a really intentional run through. It's just going to be one a day. And so they had like really opposing approaches, yet they were both champions, one after another. So I think finding the right approach for you is really important. And for me, it sort of sits somewhere in the middle. Like, I think, repeating it over and over and over again until you've lost your voice is not super conducive to me, to having a really good, experience. I think finding a balance. Like, I'm currently doing between like 4 and 6 run throughs a day. Um, Work of like Taylor's have been so incredibly supportive with like the time and the space. Like, I've built a little mock-up WBC stage in the office where I'm practicing, and I'll come into work like 7:30, 8 o'clock, and do 2 run throughs. Then I try and do two after lunch about 12 o'clock, and then after my work day at 5 o'clock, I do another two. So I think having that space between them, number one, allows me to do my actual job, which is super important, and number two, it does give me a bit of space to like reflect on those run throughs and think like, is there anything I need to change? Is there anything that was like? It's important to celebrate what you did that was actually really good and find that balance. So like balance is key. But also if you're a person that needs to put in a million hours, recognize that in yourself and yeah, find what feels good.
Have things changed for you since winning the UK Barista Championship? You mentioned on another podcast that I was listening to, um, you didn't mention it. Your guest mentioned it. Excuse me. Um, that this idea of becoming a barista champion is something that has an expiration on it just by its nature. It can stay at the top of your CV, UK Barista Champion 2025, but by its nature, there's more barista champions coming, and there's more barista champions in the past, and so it's just getting saturated. It is just a saturation kind of thing, and you have your moment where the advice of the guest I think that you had on, and I'm forgetting who it was there's this moment to sort of be intentional and capitalize on it. I'd be curious if that's something that you kind of thought through or something that you're currently thinking through, or was it more of kind of the dog that caught the car? Like, I don't know what to do now sort of thing.
Yeah, I think like at different phases in my life, like maybe even a couple of years ago, like this would have been a moment where I'd been like, oh my God, like my time is now. I really need to seize the opportunity. I need to leverage this any way I can to, benefit me personally or professionally. But I'm feel in a really good place in my life at the moment. Like I'm super happy with where I work and what my role is, like where I live. Like everything is like quite sweet at the moment. So I'm just trying to enjoy it without like overthinking it. And like mostly I've not really had much time to dwell on it so much because I've like gone like straight into prep for WBC. Like after I won the UK championship, I had to move house, and then I had like a 2 week holiday booked in that we'd booked like a year in advance, and then that just ate away a load of time. And so I had to get like pretty sharp into uh, preparation. So I've not had too much time to think about and um, think about what being the UK champion means. Uh, but I think it's quite nice that maybe for me it doesn't mean. I'm trying to think how to word this appropriately, but like it's not like being the UK champion isn't all consuming. Going competing in Milan is all consuming, but I'm quite looking forward to maybe going back to just being a normal person after the World Barista Championships.
Yeah, I pick up two things in what you just said, uh, which I think is important. One, as you're preparing for these things or as you're competing, life continues, right? You mentioned you move house. There's other things to do. You have your day job. It's not like people. Most people can't just go into kind of a vacuum and then do, 10, you know, 10 routines a day and tweak things and do that for months on end and kind of come out the other side, right? So having some sort of, you know, I think balance is the wrong word because there's clearly an obsession around it, right? Where you have to be kind of all in, fully engaged, but having some sense that kind of you can't let the wheels fall off in other elements of your life. And then the other thing that you said that I do love about kind of your approach to things, which is uh, I, I I'm happy with where I am and what I'm doing currently. And that it's not that I achieve this goal and then I can become who I want to be. It's sort of I am who I want to be, and then this goal is sort of a part of that journey. And I think that that's so important and so common in people that are kind of successful is the goal isn't the result. It is sort of this cliche of the journey to that goal is really the result, right? I don't know if that's the same sense of there will always be all these new life milestones and all these other things that come up that I want to be able to achieve, but I need to enjoy somewhat of the process of achieving those. As you kind of look back at kind of becoming UK Barista Champion, has the process of achieving that been enjoyable? Has that been something that have there been any regrets along the way? In other words,
I like. I don't think there are any regrets along the way, but I try to not regret most things because I think like all the decisions we make, like they shape who we are. Whether you went through like a negative experience at the time, I think you can quite often take that and learn from it. Um, but like the seeing the sort of the trophy that says I'm the 2025 UK champion is just like it's for me proof of like all the hard work that I put in. And it's like, okay, yeah, like you are capable of pushing yourself to achieve something which, for me feels massive. Like UK Barista Champion might be an entirely worthless title to some people. They might not be like, "Oh, right, someone's really good at making coffee. Wow, what an amazing skill." I don't really care. But for me, as somebody who works in the coffee industry and has like you know been watching the Barista Championship, it is kind of proof that like, oh wow, like I now sort of have my name alongside all these other people in the coffee industry that I've like respected from a distance or whatever. And yeah, I don't have any regrets in my approach to how I've prepared for it. Like it consumes a lot of brain power for a lot of time. So like I could have perhaps been more, present in my personal life. But I have like really understanding friends and family who've been like super supportive. And I've like had a really awesome journey to get to where I am today. So I'm so grateful for everyone.
Have you had that experience in your I'm sure you have. I mean, I just I'm but I'll ask the question anyway. But have you had these moments where you are in such a you're in such a niche, and we all are in this kind of specialty coffee world, and then you kind of get to this ultra specialty coffee world and this competition environment, that sort of thing. But you're in such kind of this niche ecosystem that this is such a big deal that you're UK Barista Champion. And then you kind of step outside of that just one layer, maybe even two, and you find yourself being like, well, I'm the UK Barista Champion, and people are like, what do you even what? Like, what are you talking about? Do you have friends and family that are just completely confused by this whole thing, and that you've you find yourself kind of over explaining it to justify why it's such a cool thing? Does that happen?
Yes, but also I think it's a very British thing to be quite self-effacing and satirical
Yeah.
about it. It's like, oh, I'm the best in the country at making some, tiny beverages for a specific group of silent judges. But like, yeah, I don't know. I think it's important to be quite grounded. And like as I drove home from London after winning the UK Barista Championship, we we went to a service station. I had to get a coffee from Starbucks. I put some sugar in it. It was quite nice. Uh, this is not me promoting Starbucks. My opinions on Starbucks are maybe not uh, cohesive or fully formed at this point in time. Various coffee businesses are always doing awful and fantastic things in conjunction. Oh wow, it's getting quite this this thought's becoming quite a ramble, but essentially, like, like it's being the UK British Champion is like super cool to me. It's super important to me, but also I realize like to my mum, it's only super important because I've won it, because I've done
Yeah.
it. If I didn't do it, my mum wouldn't care less. My sister wouldn't care. No, but like, but it's it's useful and it's things can be more than one thing. We all contain multitudes, and as is the nature of something as niche as the Barista Championships. But I I really struggle with this because I don't want to like downplay it and belittle it because like I think the importance of these competitions is high, and I think there's a lot of benefits to many people of them. Like nothing's perfect, but the like on a personal level, like I'm like super pleased with where I am and super excited for Milan.
Yeah, as you should be. Well, congratulations on all of it, Will. It's really unbelievable the amount of effort you put in to getting to this point. I'm sure no matter what happens in Milan, you should be very proud of what you've been able to achieve. Your Britishness included in that. I know you're not gonna say that outright, and you're gonna have some quip no matter what happens, just because it's in your nature and your culture to kind of deface a little bit. If people are gonna get uh, too over the top in complimenting you, but I'll go ahead anyway. I think it really is, and your story is. I just appreciate your willingness to share it on with me today and walk through it. I think it will be helpful for other people. I do think for producers that listen to our podcast, will find it helpful as well, and just kind of understanding kind of that competition, because it's such a different culture, it's such a different mindset, and it feels like this unattainable, unachievable thing, and you've just put in the hard work over years to get there, and I think you should be proud of that. And I know your mom and your sister are too. So I wouldn't worry too much about that, even if they don't know what it is and all that it entails. So yeah, thank you for the time today, and just thank you so much for what you do in the industry to educate and get the word out there, and the great representative you are for specialty coffee just worldwide. It's humbling to see.
Thanks so much for having me, and thank you for putting up with my panicked ramblings as I enter minor crises about my identity and who I am and what coffee is. And yeah, thanks for having me. It's been super awesome. I'm really grateful.
Yeah, anytime. There's the British that comes out at the end. I love it. Anyway, my friend, we will talk to you soon. Good luck in Milan. I'll be watching, as the world will.
Thank you.